Well, good morning, everybody, and it's such a pleasure to join you here today. I appreciate every opportunity to meet Alberta's business leaders, so thank you for the invitation to say a few words and also answer a few questions. I'll keep my remarks very short because I do want to get into the question and answer session. But first, I'd like to thank Alberta Enterprise Group for its advocacy on behalf of business and its efforts in creating a strong business community in our province. You have been going strong for, I think, at least a couple of decades now, and each iteration just gets stronger and stronger. I'm just so pleased with the work that Catherine is doing. I love the format that you have for your events, with sort of the rapid fire lobbying at the beginning for members, and then a broader discussion with the group. So thank you for that innovation. It's remarkable, and it was very, very helpful for me. Thank you. And so many good friends who are still involved in the organization and have been for a very long time. Terry, I see Herv, of course, Bruno. There's probably a few others. John Liston, who was with me at the same time as we were building the organization over the last year. And it was, I mentioned to the earlier group, this I felt was kind of the last part of the education that I needed to be able to do the job that I'm doing now, because so much of the work that happens with Alberta Enterprise Group is those mid-sized private companies, a lot of family-based companies that are in some ways the hidden economy, because regular folks just don't see a lot of the work that gets done, because many of your companies are not publicly traded, so they aren't able to watch what's happening on a daily basis when they're looking at their stock returns. Nor are many of your companies frontline retail, and so the regular consumer doesn't see the B2B work that you do. So I'm grateful to have had that experience, and hope to be able to continue to be a champion for your interests, because as an organization, you share our government's commitment to creating an environment where businesses can grow and thrive and succeed. And we share an understanding that it's private enterprise that fuels this growth. And that's been our overriding goal from the start, growing our economy so that there are more jobs for Albertans, and your voice is important to us. Value your input as Alberta's government develops programs and policies that support your members, facilitate growth, and cut unnecessary red tape. I think we all agree that the most important thing government can do for business owners and job creators is to enable you to do what you do best, which is to run your business. And I'm so pleased to see the success you're having. Alberta's businesses are creating jobs and opportunities. You're growing the economy, ensuring Alberta remains the economic engine of Canada. Businesses are crucial to a healthy economy, so it's critical that government ensures that Alberta has the best environment for businesses to operate in. Alberta's government has made it job number one to ensure our province is the best place to own and operate a business. And the work we have done is seeing results. Business incorporations are increasing year over year in our province, and not only will we continue supporting the growth and success of businesses across Alberta, but we're working to attract new investment from around the world. Alberta consistently shows a high level of investment when compared to other provinces. In fact, last year, the private sector investment in our province increased by 13.1% over 2021. In addition to business and investment growth, we're also seeing efforts pay off as more and more people choose to move here. Alberta's population is growing at an exceptionally strong pace. So far in 2023, Alberta has seen a net growth of nearly 30,000 people from the rest of the country, growth that we have not seen since 2006, and is outpacing every other province. The optimism in Alberta is unshakable. You can see it in the data, but you can feel it as well. Families and job creators and entrepreneurs and employers know what matters: low taxes and good jobs, a skilled workforce, and competitive wages. The best and brightest are choosing Alberta. Businesses from all over the world are choosing Alberta. Families, job creators, employers, entrepreneurs know that low taxes, good jobs, and a skilled workforce and competitive wages matter. Alberta has a bright future ahead, and there are many reasons for job creators and investors to be optimistic. Forecasters, major banks, and financial institutions agree Alberta will continue to lead the country in growth over the next 2 years. Our strong business community plays an important role in that growth, and as you continue to enjoy the success and prosperity of our province, and as you contribute to the success and prosperity of our province, Alberta's government is committed to supporting your prosperity. That means maintaining a business-friendly environment that includes low taxes and our focus on reducing red tape so that you can do what you do best. We want to ensure that you are able to succeed. We want you to continue creating jobs and to building out our economy. Let me just reiterate to you as well that you are critical to the future of our province, and we'll continue working with you to support you. Let me also leave you with a takeaway. Alberta's government is in your corner. We want to ensure that you succeed. We want you to continue creating good jobs for Albertans and continue to building our economy. As Alberta's population grow, our economy continues to expand and diversify. I look forward to continue to partner with all of you. Thank you again for the invitation to speak again today, and I do look forward to taking your questions. I'll make sure to have my pen so that I can take some notes, and let's get into the Q&A so I can hear what's on your mind. Thanks for having me out.
Thank you, Premier Smith. And now I will welcome Daryl Sater, who will be our moderator today. Thank you. And we've got a few questions from our sponsors. They will be asked first. And then to you, our guests, there's paper and pen in front of you. If you have a question, please write your name, your company name, your phone number, and your question legibly so that we can read it easily. So if you can do that, and then just let Kathy, where's Kathy? Thank you, Kathy. Kathy and I will be picking them up. So please put your hand up when it's ready. Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead.
Thank you, and Premier Smith, it's great to see you here, and you've been very busy this summer. Seems you've been at every small town rodeo and every event in the province, and your calendar still is going, and even as we're getting closer to the session at the end of October. But I think last week was particularly busy. You had the World Petroleum Congress, the release of the Alberta Pension Plan report. You attended a couple more energy meetings, conferences in Banff. So just to start off, fill us out. How is that? What does that week bring for us?
Well, I can tell you a couple things. So you probably noticed I had to spend a lot of time during the election in Calgary and area, and Edmonton and area. So some of the strongest communities and strongest support that we have in Alberta are areas that were able to win, I think in the case of Nate Horner, 82% support. And so I knew that the only way that you can really get the feedback that you need about what's going on in the communities is to go out to them. So I made a commitment to go and visit as many as possible during the summer months. So I got some wonderful feedback on that. And that's part of the reason that was so busy. The World Petroleum Congress was such a great opportunity for Alberta. And I had to do a bit of a course correction after Jonathan Wilkinson, our natural resources minister, sucked the oxygen out of the room with his speech, where he basically told an entire world of investors, don't bother investing in Canada, we're shutting it down by 2050. That was essentially, you could tell, just the mood of the room was crushed after that. So I went to the mic and had to correct him on a couple of things. One of the main things that I've been saying is that we are in the middle of an energy transition away from emissions. We are not transitioning away from oil and natural gas. And there's a number of ways in which we're going to continue to feed the world when it comes to this crucial energy supply. One of the things that we've been talking about, we'll talk a little bit about it, I think, in some of your other questions, but how can we export more LNG, displace coal and wood and other higher polluting fuels, and share credit with the jurisdiction that we're helping to reduce emissions? If this is a global emissions reduction problem, then let's find global solutions for it. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage, we already have projects at scale, and we're already storing millions of tons of CO2. We just have to make sure that we continue to invest in that and make incremental improvements. We have a hydrogen economy that is building out. I'm just blown away by the hydrogen hub in the Edmonton region and the fact that I think the last hydrogen conference had 5,000 delegates at it. We are going to be a continued leader in developing out our hydrogen resources and building the network for that. I think Edmonton International Airport secured 100 Toyota Mirais. I got a chance to drive a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle over the summer. And I gather there's also now a 5,000 car challenge so that the business leaders in this community are going to try to get out to those 5,000 cars to get that critical mass so that we can start accelerating the transition to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Biomass is going to be increasingly important, not only biomass for waste to energy, but biomass for to hydrogen is another potential option as well. We're seeing a community in the Edmonton area that wants to build an entire hydrogen community so that you can fuel your home on the basis of hydrogen. I'm very keen to see that happen as well. So all of these things lead me to be very excited about our opportunity in Alberta. And so that was one of the things that I got across at the conference. The other one, though, is we have to have this dual approach of reducing emissions and solving energy poverty. In that room last week, there were nations from all over the world, some of whom, in combination, have 2.2 billion citizens who do not have electricity at all. I can tell you the Nigerian delegation, with 200 million people in their country, wasn't very impressed with being told by rich countries to pack it in when 98 million of their population don't have electricity at all. So that, I think, was something that resonated. I met with the Indonesian delegation, the Malaysian delegation, Korea, Japan, Saudi Arabia, the Saudi prince, Abdulaziz bin Salman Al Saud was here as well. He's the energy minister. He invited me to go to Riyadh. And so we'll be at COP28 taking that opportunity to not only be in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but also go to Riyadh and Qatar. Because I think what we're seeing is that the oil producing countries in that region, they're leading the pathway as well on decarbonization. We'll be able to get into a really healthy competition with them. But they also share our concern that you can't get there short-circuiting on this issue of solving the world's poverty problem. And so I think that that's why we found a lot of common cause. It was a very productive conference after that, and I think we're going to have some great relationships with the countries that are there.
Great, thanks. To your points, lots of energy discussions this past week. It's no secret that the government, your government in Ottawa, have quite different opinions. And so a bit of a head there at the Congress, popped up there. Before we get to any more questions, can you just give us an update on the Alberta-Ottawa relationship?
It ranges from being not bad to being really terrible. So on the not bad side, I would say that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is quite keen to work with us on small modular nuclear. You may have seen that my Environment Minister, Rebecca Schultz, announced partial funding of a project with Cenovus to see how small modular nuclear might be rolled out at one of their industrial plants. We have Ontario and Ontario, Saskatchewan and New Brunswick all keen to work together. We'd signed an MOU a few years ago, and my energy minister is working with those groups to see how we might be able to accelerate that. So that's a positive. We still have a lot of social license that we need to get. We happily work with companies and communities that are welcoming and wanting to try this new technology, but we know we've never had nuclear in this province before. And so that's going to take a little bit of time to do the consultation and the rollout on that. So there's a positive. Another positive is that we've been talking as well about how we might be able to get better interties with British Columbia and Manitoba. We signed an economic corridors agreement with Saskatchewan and Manitoba that would allow for us to be able to bring in transmission from their province and hopefully also have it go the other way so that we can get LNG to Hudson Bay and then off to the world. So that's positive. We're working with British Columbia on Article 6. I can talk more about that, but that's the mechanism that we would use in the Paris Accord to be able to get credit when we reduce emissions abroad. And even though I didn't like all of Jonathan Wilkinson's speech, he talked about Article 6 and how he wanted to work with us to be able to do that. So that's positive. And hydrogen. Jonathan Wilkinson is also a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle enthusiast. He has a hydrogen vehicle. So building out that infrastructure is going to gain us some support. Minister Champagne and I text from time to time because we're both very keen to see Dow Chemical make their final investment decision on the net zero petrochemical program that they have. He's also very keen to help with Air Products and their hydrogen facility. So that's all pretty good. And let me just say, I want to start with the positive because I'm going to turn the page in a minute. And Chrystia Freeland, I just wrote her a letter about how we might be able to collaborate on including biomass in our carbon capture, utilization, and storage tax credits, because that's going to be another essential part of the energy mix. And I think that's another area that we can have some common cause. I think you probably all saw that the Trans Mountain Pipeline managed to get their deviance from their existing route, and so that is going to make sure that that comes on stream faster than the 9 months it would otherwise be delayed. So as I said, there are lots of things that are positive, and we are having constructive conversations. We're meeting every 2 weeks to talk these things through. And then there's Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, who is not constructive. In fact, I think he's quite damaging. And I've told his colleagues that I don't understand why they're allowing him to damage so many relationships with so many provinces, because he comes through with these pronouncements that are not consulted on, they're not well thought out, they are unconstitutional, and it results in an equal and opposite reaction. If they punch us, we have to punch back twice as hard. And that's what we're doing on the clean electricity regulations, because it is impossible in this environment for us to get to a net zero power grid by 2035 based on the rules that they've put in front of us. I'll tell you a couple reasons why it's impossible, and you'll understand why it is we're fighting this so hard. They have said that you can have abated natural gas on the power grid as long as you're abating 95% of the emissions. Our technology right now allows us to get about 60 to 73%. And so we might be able to get to 80% by 2035. But here's the problem. What business owner is going to take a leap of faith that the technology will develop enough in 12 years so that when January 1st, 2035 rolls around, they don't end up in jail 3 weeks into that year? Because it's criminal sanction that Guibault is talking about. 3 years in jail if by 2035 your power that you bring on stream is not abated 95%. It's bananas. And so then you think, okay, well, solar and wind and battery power, that's what he has in mind for how our province should be governed. Let me tell you how expensive battery power is, because I just met with a company yesterday that's contemplating it. It costs about $1 million for every 1 megawatt that you want to have for storage. So a 200 megawatt installation would need a $200 million investment to get the battery to be able to back that up. And the battery would last 1 hour. So we've got 12,000 megawatts on our power grid. So you tell me what the cost would be of trying to get battery backup on all of that that would last something reasonable. So when you think about when we don't have wind and solar working, it can sometimes last for an entire day or an entire week or a 3-week period when we get that heavy polar vortex that sits on us, or the heat wave that we had this past summer. So this is dangerous conversation coming from Ottawa. I don't want to sugarcoat it. People die when it's minus 30 and they can't turn the furnace on. People die when it's plus 30 and they can't turn the air conditioning on. And we have an obligation and a constitutional responsibility and jurisdiction to make sure that our power grid actually produces power in a reliable way and an affordable way. So that's the big fight that we're having right now. They want to bring on an emissions cap that they keep telling us about. They want to bring on massive methane restrictions that we're hearing could be as crazy as 100% abated by 2030. So these are the big challenges that we have. We're dealing, I think, with a government that just is defying the laws of science. They just are not prepared to be practical. At least that particular minister is not prepared to be practical. We're making some headway with the other ministers, but it's not going well with Stephen Guibault. So if any of you can assist us with the lobbying, we'll leave that with you, and we'll see if we can do a squeeze play on him.
Sounds good. You mentioned a little bit about Article 6 in the UN Paris Accord. Apparently you and Premier Eby have been doing a little bit of discussions together. You talked a bit about it. Any specific opportunities do you see for both provinces?
Yeah, well, the interesting part will be with LNG Canada. So LNG Canada has partial ownership from a number of different countries. So I think Japan owns or Japanese company owns a portion, Malaysia, Indonesia, China. And so that, I think, creates the avenue for us to be able to have those jurisdiction-to-jurisdiction negotiations. So I've already raised it with them that if we want to be able to get the second part of that project developed, David Eby has a real problem because he's got a hard emissions cap. So we need to find a way to reduce his emissions for him so that he has the latitude to be able to increase his development. Because I don't think it's practical for it to be 100% hydropower. I just think that there's some complications there, that he needs to use additional types of power there and needs to be able to have the latitude for an increase in emissions. However, if you look at each train, is what they call them, so each facility, where they're building 2 trains right now, if you were to get credit for reducing coal, as a for instance in China, that would be a net gain of 15 megatons, a net reduction of 15 megatons per train. You do 4 trains, you have 60 megatons of reduction. British Columbia's entire emissions profile is 59 megatons. They could be net neutral just by reducing emissions abroad. Another calculation that we did when Stephen Guilbeault went to China, we said, well, rather than placate China with the 2 coal-fired plants they're bringing on each week and their plan to be net neutral by 2060, why don't you tell them we could accelerate that? If we were to share some credit for reducing emissions by having you transition away from coal and into natural gas, if we just replace 20% of China's existing coal fleet, we would be net neutral for an entire Canadian economy. So that's why this Article 6 notion is so powerful. And if we can find other ways to improve our pipeline plumbing so that we can get more down to the US, work collaboratively with Saskatchewan and Manitoba to perhaps get it to Hudson Bay, maybe work with Ontario to get it to James Bay, maybe work with our friends in Maine and New Brunswick to be able to do export off the East Coast. Those are the kind of things that we're looking at. And we're making incremental progress on that. It was never really envisioned that we would have a lower emissions fossil fuel replace a higher emissions fossil fuel. So that's one of the barriers that we're trying to overcome. But I can tell you, I think Europe is becoming far more pragmatic. When I just received a story a week ago that they have wound down a wind farm so that they can reignite their coal plant so that they can have baseload power. And that's the reality of what's happening in the world. Over the summer, I went to the LNG Canada conference in Vancouver as well. And I met with delegations from every region of the world who represented the businesses in their region. And they said, if you do not provide us with clean LNG by 2030, we will have to build coal plants. And so you'd end up then increasing emissions. And that doesn't make sense if we're talking about a global problem. So this is why we're fighting this one so hard, and this is why I think Article 6 is going to be really important.
Good. Thank you. Canada will need to have a significant acceleration of major infrastructure over the next couple of decades to meet emission targets. Do you see room to improve regulatory concerns for major projects in Alberta? To what degree are these dependent on the federal process and the ability to work on improved joint reviews, substitutions, or regional strategic assessments?
Well, I gather that there is an ability to do substitution where we would take the lead on doing environmental approvals, and then the federal government would recognize our process. And so I think British Columbia has had some success on that. We need to figure out how to have some success on that. I think the best avenue for us to try that first off is on small modular nuclear, because there are already a number of provinces who have found the pathway. We have a major producer in Ontario, their Ontario Power, that is going to provide not only the rest of the country but also the world. So I think we have an avenue for us to be able to make that point. We still are waiting for the outcome of the C69 challenge, which Alberta Enterprise Group helped to fund. So thank you for that. And so we sadly lost one of our big champions on the Supreme Court, so we're a little bit nervous about how that's going to go. But it's so clear to me in reading what it is that they have done. I accept that the federal government has jurisdiction over infrastructure that goes cross-border. But what they have done is they have come in and assumed jurisdiction over everything we do in this province. In theory, I can't even build 75 kilometers of road without it being federally approved. We can't build a power plant now higher than 200 megawatts without it being federally approved. So that's why we had to fight this so far, is that let's work on cross-border transportation issues for sure, but leave us alone to manage our own business. And we haven't had that resolved yet, and I guess we'll see when the court comes down. But it does. This is the reason why we now have to work with the federal government, because the state of the legislation is such that if we don't collaborate, we're going to create so much uncertainty for business. We want to try to create a certain business environment. That's why we've aligned with the 2050 target. It's just a matter of making sure that they see that we're genuinely interested in making those investments and getting them to partner with us. One more thing I'd say is that we're going to announce our carbon capture utilization and storage credit at COP28. We've encouraged the federal government to announce what they're going to do as well. It's been a little bit of, well, you go first. Okay, well, I'm not going to go first. You go first. So, okay, we'll go first. We've told them we're going to be announcing it in November. And I hope that they'll be able to work with us so that we can create that certainty. I know that there's a number of projects that are gearing up to do carbon capture, utilization, and storage, but won't do it until they know what the tax credit picture looks like. They've told us they want that by the end of the year, and so we're really pushing to get that, and hopefully that will give some of the clarity that we need.
Good, thank you. In regards to resources access, you've recently referenced direction to the Alberta Environment and Protected Areas to develop a framework for protected environment through the identification of GO zones. What can you share about this framework, and how can stakeholders be involved? And how does it fit in with the province's land use planning and management priorities?
So here's what I always had in mind. When the land use framework came in, I always thought what would happen is, do you remember those, I'm going to date myself here. Remember those transparencies in school where you'd have, one thing overlaid and then, forestry overlaid, and then you'd have your agriculture land overlaid, and then you'd be able to see what went where? Well, that's kind of what I told the minister I have in mind is, show me where all the best development is for our oil sands and natural gas and conventional oil resources. Show me where all the areas are for mining our critical minerals. Show me the areas that are prime for developing out forestry, and as well, show me what our current infrastructure is for pipelines, for road systems, for other types of critical infrastructure, and where the gaps are, and also show me where the biodiversity is and where we have to protect species at risk. And it should be possible, if you think of layering each one of those different things one on top of the other, it should be pretty clear what the principal use of each area of the province should be, what competition there might be, and how we might have to mediate between different users, and what is, sorry, that's got to be no-go zone, because it's just, there's too much critical habitat and too many species at risk that we can't go there. But the problem that we've had is we've gone the other way. We've gone out with consultations and said, tell us where we shouldn't build. And then the environmentalists say, everywhere. Right? That everywhere is a place that has critical habitat or biodiversity or water or whatever it would be. And we have to take a very different approach to that. So that's what I've told our minister, that we need to accelerate, because 10 years ago, we did 2 of the plans in southern Alberta and I think Red Deer, but we have 5 watersheds that have to be done. So we're now up for renewal on those 2 first plans, and we haven't done the last 3. So if we can at least create the map and then take that out and say, hey, here's what we have in mind. Do you have any modifications we should make? I think that would be a little bit more of a healthy process, because everybody needs to know where it is you're going to develop. And we may be able to just use our pause on wind and solar to be that first step, because we need to identify what are the go zones for wind. Where are the prime areas that you can go where you're not going to be interfering with agriculture land, you're not going to be interfering with viewscapes, and you're not going to be in a migratory bird pathway or creating harm to the bat population. We could also say the same thing for solar. Where can you go that isn't going to take up prime agriculture land? So those are the kind of things that we're talking about. We'll probably get a first taste of that 6 months from now when we finish the pause and we let people know what the new rules are. But that's the kind of certainty we want to give to every single industry, so that going in, the answer is going to be yes. It might be yes with conditions, but it's going to be yes. And then we can try to accelerate the process to make sure that you get the permits that you need faster. I should add sand and gravel too, because I know that there's a lot of sand and gravel owners in this room.
Premier Smith, your public support of the Alberta energy sector and the electricity grid reliability, your support on that's been exceptional since you've been elected. Thank you very much. Could you please give us some highlights on the specific steps that are being taken by the government now to implement change in legislation and bureaucracy around the application process for new gas-fired power generation, carbon tax cap or removal, the NOx guidelines, potential financial backstops for new gas-fired generation in the province? Can you chat about that for a sec?
So I say this so many times, I hope I'm not repeating myself, because I think I said a little bit of this morning in the smaller group session. But the problem that we have when I went to the rural municipalities meeting back in the spring was that the Alberta Utilities Commission was just ahead of me. And they revealed that we had 23,000 megawatts of solar and wind in the queue, and virtually no natural gas in the queue. So everybody was all worried that this pause was going to scare investment away. Well, now we have 41,000 wind and solar projects in the queue because everybody's realized the only place to be able to freely invest in wind and solar is here in Alberta. So it's actually increased the interest in people coming into our market. The problem is we can't add wind and solar onto the grid unless we're also adding on some kind of base load backup. In fact, we've got to give priority to base load. And in our province, it's been natural gas. And whether it's natural gas with abatement, and we do our best effort to get to fully abated in the time frame that we need to, but we need some runway until we're developing some of the other options. Small modular nuclear probably will not be rolled out in this province until mid-2030s because the first small modular design is going to be rolled out in Darlington in 2028. So there's a bit of a time lag there. The other thing is that abatement, from what I'm hearing, 80% would be pretty darn good. But that last mile, that last 20% is going to be pretty darn expensive. So when you look at what Capital Power's plan is, they want to do carbon capture, utilization, and storage. They want to bring on small modular nuclear, and they want to do direct air capture. And there's some amazing things happening on direct air capture with Avatar Innovation. They have 2 projects that are in the finalists for the $100 million X Prize that Elon Musk has put up. So that is going to be another part of the solution, but that's kind of the last step that we need to make sure that the technology develops around. So how do we then incentivize more natural gas, knowing nobody wants to build it, no shareholders want to pay for it, and nobody wants to go to jail in 2035. So we know we have to de-risk it in some way. I don't know what that looks like yet. Maybe we do a long-term power purchase agreement where we take the liability if we don't get to those targets by 2035. Maybe that's the way that we do some de-risking on it. We're still talking to the industry over it, but our energy-only market is failing us only because we have hostile federal policy that is interfering in how the market would work. So what do you do when the market isn't working? You can't remove the barriers. You sometimes have to intervene. It is not my preference, I can tell you that. But we are talking a lot about how do we de-risk nuclear, how do we de-risk hydroelectric, because you can do run-of-the-river hydroelectric, how do we de-risk small modular nuclear, but still maintain the private sector construction and operation. And we're talking to a lot of different players about that because we want to get it right. We don't want to scare people, but we also have to develop baseload. So that's sort of one huge part of it. I also heard loud and clear that our NOx policies don't make sense because they're more stringent than what they have at the federal level. I don't know if I have an answer for you, but I did send a note to Rebecca Schultz on that because we did have a meeting with her and her deputy minister. And she said, gee, that doesn't make sense. We should fix that. So that has happened in the last month. So I need to find out where we're at on that. But do know I recognize that that's also creating some problems for you as well.
Good, thanks. How are we doing for time? Got lots of time? One more question. Okay. This has to do with the Alberta universities and starting to engage more and more with partnering with, say, Alberta Indigenous, for example. Concordia is doing that, and local businesses on research and innovation projects that will involve our students. And believing this is a good link, how do we see the government working forward with the Alberta universities to help provide better economic outcomes for Albertans?
I'm open to hearing some solutions on this because I can tell you what I'm hearing from business leaders in the research world is that it's really difficult to get access to some of the university-funded research labs. And one of the suggestions was, why don't you have funding follow the researcher? So have a process where the researcher applies for the grant, you give the grant money to the researcher, and then the researcher goes to the institution so that you might end up with that researcher using the existing publicly funded facilities, or maybe there's a bunch of additional capacity at some of the private labs, and we would be able to accelerate the private labs as well. We also have Innovate Alberta, which is doing a tremendous job of helping to support some of the early startup type of projects that are out there. Alberta Enterprise Corporation is one of the ways in which we help to provide additional venture capital. We've got our Emissions Reduction Alberta, which we are using as a mechanism to help fund some of the early stage as well, green technology. So I'm open-minded about this. I guess the way I look at it is that we have to find a way to create more access to those kind of labs. And I'm hearing a number of different barriers and problems, and very open-minded. Maybe at the next one, Catherine, you can get somebody who can propose a solution to me on that one. But I just wanted to give you some of the ideas of how we're scoping it out.
Good. Thank you very much for this. We have appreciated your answer so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. We'll do this again.
Thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Premier Smith. We do have Richard Wong with CAP to thank Premier Smith officially.